Mollie Flanagan is a wonderful resource for Rhode Island creatives to know about. She's the individual artist program director at RISCA, and despite state furloughs and difficult times, has made herself readily available to you through events like this one, Zoom calls, and meetups. So Mollie has shared some funding resources and links with us that Susanna and I have incorporated into a document that includes grants and fellowships available locally and on a national level. So we'll go ahead and upload that file to the chat, and you'll be able to download it from the chat, or we'll post it in the Slack where you can email that to it later. We can email it to you. So that resource will be something you can take home with you. But for now, Mollie is here to update us on financial aid being available to artists, and we'll take your questions at the end. So Mollie, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying the delightful fall weather with my coffee from Seven Stars and my cinnamon bun, as you all saw. I just got home from the farmer's market. So I'm having quite a wonderful, we're going apple picking later, right? Saturday. So I wish that this presentation and my update about what's happening both in the state and nationally in the arts would be like as sunny and optimistic as I am today and the weather is, but it's not. It's everything is buts, y'all. So for those of you who haven't attended anything from me before, I have a certain level of bluntness and a little bit too much honesty about what's happening. And that's always, so that is a tool I use for good, I hope, because I want you all to know as much about what is really happening, you know, behind the scenes in state government as possible. And like as much as I know about what's happening nationally as possible. So I have a little presentation. I'll be looking at the chat as well as Susanna, and I'll try and answer questions as they come up as best as I can, but we'll definitely have Q&A time later. Let me see now. So you should all see my presentation, and now I'm trying to figure out if I can also see the chat at the same time. And I don't think I can.
We'll keep an eye on it for you, Mollie.
Perfect.
If you don't mind me interrupting if something comes through.
I would love that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk at you for a while, but please feel free to ask questions as they come up or at the end. Okay, so we're gonna do, there we go. What is RISCA? Who is RISCA? So we are a state government agency. Every single state and also all of the territories, so like Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, everybody has one. Almost all of them are state government agencies and not independent nonprofits. So we get funding partially from state government and partially from the National Endowment for the Arts. And what we do primarily is granting. Sorry, my cats are like having a whole thing right over there, but it's okay because my partner is on it. You know, work from home, right? So we're mainly a grant making agency, but in the past couple of years, we've also pivoted to doing more professional development, technical support, that sort of thing, like this with our wonderful community partners. But I think it's important to remember that as an agency of state government, my goal is not to support artists, it's to support every single resident of the state of Rhode Island. And the way that I do that is by supporting artists, right? So it's like a sort of piece. Okay, so program areas. We have separate program areas, and we're divided up at RISCA staff-wise along these program area lines. So my colleague Todd Trebor, who is an amazing, well, everybody I work with is an amazing human, works with nonprofit and fiscally sponsored organizations. I'm the individual artist program director. We have an arts in education director, healthcare, and then folk and traditional arts. Okay, so normally in these talks, here's where I would talk about RISCA's grants for artists, which are usually really great and exciting, and I want you all to be applying for fellowships every year. instead, I'm going to talk about how terrible everything is and what things I know about that can help you. Yeah, we're in this together. I'll do everything I can to advocate for you all individually, specifically, all artists, and for the arts sector at both a local, state, and national level. Yeah, this is all stuff I've already said. Just a note about everything, right? Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is what's happening at RISCA, because it's a very different year at RISCA than normal. State relief and support programs, some national programs, and then my educated guesses about what I hope is or is not coming next in general. Okay, so RISCA. So all of RISCA has been working from home since mid-March, like most people. Actually, the second to last event I had was at What Cheer Writers Club the day before y'all closed. I got to be the last thing there giving grant advice for our spring grant cycle. I got that on because of how things fell. Like I got that honor in a couple places where I was the last event. So we very quickly pivoted to do things completely differently from our individual homes. We worked in partnership with Rhode Island Foundation and the City of Providence Arts, Culture, and Tourism to get an artist relief fund up. And in 5 weeks, we awarded 436 grants of over $200,000. The governor announced the initiative. We got a ton of private money. You know, $215,000 is more than I usually grant in an entire year. So that was great, but much less than the need was at that time. But we were one of the first states that had a large artist relief fund that was actually getting checks out. We pivoted all our programming in April and May. I was doing twice a week peer support calls of just like, here's what's things were changing so fast about what was happening this week, how to access those programs, because I was spending a lot of time talking to the Department of Labor and Training and the Small Business Administration, making sure that, you know, gig workers and people who have varying income streams advocating to be included in relief packages. Again, a lot of advocacy. We did 2 rounds of meetings with all 4 of our congressional delegation in April and May, and then spent a lot of time learning, teaching, and communicating. So I know all of these things about all of these government programs that I did not have to know about before. And one thing that I've been really proud of and pushing for is the level of transparency that we've had at RISCA about what exactly is happening with us and what we're doing. So that was like the initial, oh shit, everything is yikes. I'll try and swear as little as possible, but I'm a former stagehand, so it's iffy. Okay, so what we're doing now. The really somebody described this as a crushing announcement to me in an email, and I felt like that was a very perfect word for how we're all feeling. But we announced last week that all of RISCA's grant making is on hold, and that we will not be awarding any fellowships or project grants for individuals this year. This is because we are still waiting for a state budget, so we can't spend any money. We can't award any grants at all until we have an enacted state budget. That is hopefully coming. I'll talk about that more later. Hopefully coming in mid to late November. We are expecting significant cuts unless there's a robust federal stimulus package that includes funding, flexible funding to state governments. We'll talk about that later too. So we basically are doing no granting. We have no money coming in, we have no money going out. So what we have pivoted to is really robust and different programming focused on pandemic related resiliency. For me, the major choke point is that I want to work as hard as possible to make sure artists can access the relief funds that are offered on a federal and state level that are not art specific, because that's where the majority of the money is, right? Is in SBA, PPP, and in other small business relief. So I'm really focused, I'll be really focused for the fall and the spring on getting artists more formalized as small businesses. So what's coming up next for RISCA is that I'm launching a business basics boot camp, which is free. It's 11 weeks of sequential learning. It's Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. All the sessions will also be recorded and available on RISCA's website. The first session, which I hope that y'all will be able to attend, is about values identification and goal setting, because you can't do anything until you know what you want. But we'll be talking about things like state and city registration of your business, budgeting, finances, taxes, entity selection. I have an IP lawyer who specifically supports artists coming to do a class on intellectual property. So we'll talk a little bit about marketing. So that's some pretty like high intensity, it's essentially a college class on small business stuff. So that's happening soon, starting on Tuesday. I'm very excited and also nervous. And then also we are bringing back bi-weekly artist peer support calls, Thursdays at noon every other week. These will be artist facilitated around a specific topic. Topics will be decided on by me asking artists. So if y'all have anything that you really want to learn from or talk about, or just like figure out together with your fellow artists, like shoot me an email and let me know, because or if there's any that you're interested in facilitating. There'll be things like documenting, like how are artists documenting this time, right? How to set up the best video space for you in your home to do whatever you need to do, if that's performance, if that's readings, if that's just these, right, Zoom calls. So it'll be a wide range of things based on what folks ask me for. And then in the spring, we'll do deeper dive, like 2 or 3 hour workshops on things like specific e-commerce issues, specific social media platforms, probably more into intellectual property. And again, that's on I've done a lot of surveying and talking to artists about what folks want. And then continuing to advocate for artists specifically to get more funding from, the state still has a lot of CARES Act money left that it hasn't spent yet, that a lot of which has been diverted to commerce. My colleague Todd and my boss Randy and I actually spent a large chunk of this past week working with commerce to get some of that money specifically for artists. So cross your fingers that we're working on that this coming week as well. And then for other funding, to just include artists and gig workers and folks with weird income streams that have both W-2s and 1099s, because that was a huge issue with the first round of PPP, and also how traditional unemployment and pandemic unemployment assistance didn't interact well together. And then for the arts ecosystem in general, because everybody's struggling, right? From the very biggest nonprofits to my individual artists who are having a hard time staying housed. And then working with Commerce, DLT, and Small Business Administration about what they're doing, their coming programs, and the support they have, and how I can make sure the artists are accessing that. So that's what we're doing. Everything is butts. A lot of what we're doing is waiting on a budget to know what's going to happen next. And then the big picture of what's next for RISCA is that we're currently in we just finished a major strategic plan, a 2-year strategic planning process in the early spring. We finalized our strategic plan in March. Good timing. So what has come out of that is that there's currently a working group working to overhaul our biggest grant program, Investments in Arts and Culture, which is general operating support to nonprofit arts organizations. And then in the spring, we'll be doing the same sort of working group style overhaul of our individual artist grants and then arts access grants, which are project grants for nonprofits. Continued work on the strategic plan, and then we're just waiting to see what the budget will be like, because we legitimately have no idea what it will be like for either the year that we're in now or next year. So we're just waiting because we don't know what we can do until we know what money there's going to be. Okay, questions about what's happening at RISCA? Will you unmute yourself, Anne? No. Okay. Can you put it in the chat?
Sorry, and I'm not sure why we're having trouble unmuting you, but yeah, I think the chat is the best option at this point, unless Susanna, you can unmute her.
I'm sorry, I had too many windows open. It's my fault, but I was very carefully and the whole thing. Anyway, I have a question around the SBA loans that you mentioned.
PPP.
That's like the thing that might affect people for money. And I'm all about the money. So, I've applied for the SBA loan for a business, and I also know other small businesses in Rhode Island.
Which one did you apply for, EIDL or PPP?
EIDL. Oh, we did PPP. We did PPP okay. For the club, and we did it for other things I've been involved in. But then also we've done the SBA EIDL, loan, a nonprofit I'm involved in. I think also maybe the club. And also I heard that the perfume store in Wayland Square got an EIDL loan. And the EIDL loans look good. I was just wondering, how does an individual apply for that? I know that nonprofits cannot, can they? Wait, am I confused? There's something about the EIDL loan that, like, how could an artist do that? Could some writers band together and call themselves a group like Science Freelancers of Providence, you know? But they couldn't because it's not a pre-existing company, and maybe you have to have been around for a while.
So
EIN, don't you, instead of an SSN, Social Security number? I mean, so what are the options that individual writers could do?
Oh yeah. Raise your hand if you file a Schedule C, if you're making income from your writing and you file a Schedule C. So all of you who file a Schedule C are a small business. That's how you apply for a PPP and an EIDL. You're technically a sole proprietorship. Boom, you're eligible for everything.
So I've got to tell you guys, the EIDLs are being approved quicker than I thought, and people are getting more money than they thought.
Those are also loans. They are pretty small interest, low interest rate. The reason that the PPP got so popular is because it's essentially, it turns into a grant, a forgivable loan. EIDL for a while had an advance on the loan that was completely forgivable. That's tapped out. That's been gone for a while now. But we are crossing our fingers that we'll see a second round of PPP, which is payroll protection program loans from the SBA. And if we do, pay attention to RISCA, because I did 4 or 5 workshops on filling out PPP loans, because anybody who files a Schedule C is a sole proprietor, and y'all are eligible, and it's essentially a grant to just keep your business open, right? And the thing about artists is they're all small businesses, and all y'all stayed open, whatever that means, you know what I mean? Because you're not a bricks and mortar store. This
Yeah,
is why we're doing the business basics boot camp.
right. I mean, I guess the EIDL, though, don't they give you a year to even start making payments? So you have a whole year before you have to make any payments. And then it's a 10-year loan. So it's stretched way out. I mean, yeah, it's like a student debt, but if it's eating or not eating, I would still say, by the way, you guys, it's EIDL.
Yes. Economic Injury Disaster Loan is what it stands for.
Right. And it's through the SBA. And it's up to 150,000. And they said that they were going to require for some bigger, some of the ones that were larger, they said they were going to ask for, you know, your house or something.
Yeah.
And they didn't. So
and there's no collateral for the small ones. So y'all are safe, like your personal property, if you have any, is safe.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. They didn't even require collateral for bigger ones so far that I've been involved with. So
okay. Any other RISCA questions?
And just so everyone knows, that information will be on your handout, which we'll re-upload at the end.
Yep, sure is. Okay. All right, so now we're going to get into like what help can you access, what assistance can you access. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is state social safety net programs. So unemployment, we've already touched on. There's traditional unemployment insurance. That's if you have like a regular job, right? So if I got laid off or fired because of COVID or for any other reason, I could access traditional unemployment. There's also through the CARES Act, and this was like, I cried the day the CARES Act was passed. I cried a lot of days in April and May, but also that one mostly. Because they expanded, because traditional unemployment insurance, you know, the business pays into it. It's a insurance, and then that's where the money that comes to you for unemployment comes from, is that the business has paid into it. And it gets a little wonky when you get into nonprofits. I won't get into that whole thing. But one of the things the CARES Act did was it greatly expanded unemployment to include gig workers, sole proprietors, self-employed folks, whatever you want to call that sort of stream of people who has been, you know, traditionally pretty much completely left out of all of this programming. So that was a huge win for artists. And I hope that if y'all have seen your income from your art making fall significantly and you're not getting traditional unemployment insurance, that you sign up for PUA. That being said, right now, unless there's another federal package that includes it, it expires on December 31st. So that is coming, the end of pandemic. Yeah. Yep, it was temporary and part of CARES Act. So in addition to the extra $600 a week that expired a couple of months ago, the pandemic unemployment assistance expires at December 31st. Write your Congress people and senators, although I will say that they're already very aware of this. And then there's links on how to access all of these things in the handout that Jody keeps talking about. Then SNAP, formerly food stamps, like y'all, it's one application for SNAP and for Medicaid. Like it gets you a lot of different social services aspects, but like, do not be afraid to access this kind of safety net if you need it. That's what it's there for. There's also housing help for both folks who own homes with mortgages, and also there's some renters assistance for folks who are facing eviction. That being said, to qualify for that, you have to be in a low income bracket. Again, links to all of this are going to be in the handout. And then Medicaid and health insurance, right? All of the COVID stuff counts as life change. So if you go through Rhode Island's health insurance exchange if you've had a change in your major change in your income or major change in your job status. You can see if you qualify for either one of the like supporting stipends or just straight up Medicaid. And again, like I have been on both SNAP and Medicaid as a, you know, previous freelance artist person before I was doing this job. It's there for you. You've paid into it your whole life. Please, please take advantage of it if you need it and keep yourself safe and healthy so you can continue making art at the end of this. Okay, public utilities. So the Public Utilities Commission issued a moratorium on shutoffs. So this applies to gas, electricity, and sewer water, sewage waste. That moratorium has expired. It expired in the middle of September. No, don't, it's okay. It's fine. I'm gonna tell you how to get around that expiration. So that expired in the middle of September, unless you are on a low income or modified payment plan with National Grid, in which case the moratorium has been extended until November 1st, I think, at which point there's always a winter moratorium on shutoffs for folks on this low income or repayment plan. So it's essentially extended until the spring. I think it's April 15th. So if you're having trouble paying your utilities, National Grid does not want to shut them off. They want to get you on a modified payment plan and a reduced rate. So this low income rate is also, not only does it qualify you for the moratorium on shutoffs, but it's also straight up a lower rate of payment, right? So definitely check out that link, that page on National Grid if you're having trouble meeting your utility bills, because they don't want to shut you off. They want to figure out a way for you to pay something, but not all of it. Okay, other state programs. Restore RI grants from Commerce. Oh, questions about social safety net stuff. All of those are state government programs. If you run into major roadblocks trying to access them, email me and I will work with whatever agency is in charge of them, because I have a state government email address and they'll answer me, and I can email people you can't. Like that's I've done it for so many folks with unemployment. So if you have problems, let me know. Any questions about social safety nets? Yes, I will make the slides available, absolutely. But yes, it will all be on both. I will make the slides available, yes, and it will all be on the handout. Okay, Restore RI grants. So these are grants from Commerce, and they are they're from CARES Act money that Commerce has gotten. So they have to be tied to reopening of your business, right? So, but as we mentioned earlier, if you're filing a Schedule C, you're a business and you never closed, so you count, right? Because they're only gonna give these grants to businesses that are open or in the process of reopening. That being said, these grants are a beast, y'all. They require so much documentation for so little money. So sole proprietors, single member sole proprietors, which if you're just filing a Schedule C for your writing income or whatever, you know, solo income you have, you're eligible, if it's in the arts, for $2,500, because the arts have been identified as a severely impacted industry. So that bumps up the grant amount a little bit. I will be in the coming weeks having a webinar, likely with somebody from Commerce, about how to fill out those grants, because you have to show a minimum of 30% decrease in your revenue over last year, right? And you have to have a bunch of documentation. The Commerce doesn't usually grant money, right? So they're struggling with how to do this. So we're going to work with them to make sure artists can access this. But Restore RI grants, if you're a business, which if you file a Schedule C, you are eligible for those as long as you are open, which means you're still writing. I hope you are all still writing. Another thing that we have gotten a tip that's coming, we don't know when, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, is that Commerce is also going to be offering technology grants. And this is also with COVID CARES money. So it's specifically tied to adapting your business to current COVID conditions. So this can include things like, I need better video equipment so I can stream my readings, right? It's not just like a different point of sale program for a restaurant, right? It includes y'all. Those grants will be bigger, and the application will be similar to Restore RI. And from what I'm hearing from Commerce, if you have already applied for a Restore RI grant, the application for the technology grant will be streamlined because they'll use the same information. But that'll be coming soon. Once it comes out, if you follow RISCA's Artists and Creatives of Rhode Island Facebook page, which is a link in the handout, and I'll hit that later. I post all that stuff there, as well as any like webinars, whatever I'm doing about how y'all can apply to that. Okay, take it outside. So this one is, you may have heard of this initiative. They just announced the first round of grants on Thursday, and a bunch of arts organizations got them, y'all, like a bunch. We had like a little virtual celebration at RISCA because we love it when arts organizations get money from the state, particularly like a lot of money. Like Festival Ballet got like $100,000 to do some outdoor performances. So unfortunately, y'all as sole proprietors are not eligible for that. But what Cheer Writers Club is, if y'all are gonna do any take it outside programming. Again, that application is kind of a beast. I know that Todd has been looking at it and supporting some folks. So if you're a nonprofit or municipality or some other entity, or can partner with some other entity, Todd can help you a little bit with that application. The new deadline's October 8th. I think they're planning on giving out $2 million in this round. Okay, tech support. So one thing I've been hearing from a lot of people is that they need help with e-commerce, with marketing, with SEO, with that, all of the things that we need now that our whole art practice and making any money is all online. So Commerce is offering that. They've partnered with some entities and I think a bunch of volunteers in the business community to offer free, like by phone or Zoom tech support on things like, they'll talk to you about e-commerce and SEO and setting up an online store, but also things like figuring out document sharing and how cloud stuff works. So the link to access that is also on the handout, but definitely take advantage of that. That is there. The other thing Commerce has is assistance getting PPE for small businesses, which y'all are. So if you're doing stuff in real life where you need PPE and you are having trouble paying for it and it's part of your business, Commerce has some support for that. Again, links everywhere. And then Reopening RI is just a website. It's a resource. There's no money attached to it, but it's really like the place you can go for all of the current guidelines on like what you can do, what your business can do, what you should be doing, where we are in the reopening. PPE is personal protective equipment. So it's things like masks and gloves and plexiglass barriers and, you know, the things that everybody needs that are expensive and we're having a hard time getting. Okay, those are other state programs. Questions? Yes.
I swear I didn't do any. All right. Take It Outside, which is the program where they will pay you money to do some kind of outdoor event. I had been, you know, a lot of us, I think, have been thinking about doing outdoor things, readings, whatever. But throughout the summer, they kept on changing the number of people that could be at an event together. And we also looked into things like, well, where do you do it outside? Because you have to get a park permit for the parks, and then they're getting kind of hanky about it because they're like, oh no, we don't want that many people together at the park, that sort of thing. So I guess I was stumbling on, and then of course it's going to be cold. So I was stumbling on how would, say, a group of writers apply for, let's say they wanted to do an outdoor reading event for Halloween, or, I mean, you know, something, or Christmas or Hanukkah or something. How would they do that if you don't even know if it's going to be 5 or 50 people that are allowed? Or I'm babbling now, but you know where I'm going.
I do.
Yeah.
So the thing that I will say about the Take It Outside grants is, as with other funding that's like statewide and not art specific, is that it doesn't really take into consideration how art stuff works, right? That's just the world. And the grants were really I think they designed the program with the thought that it would mainly be like municipalities and restaurants applying for things like outdoor propane heaters and that sort of thing. And then they got a bunch of really creative grants from a bunch of arts organizations, of course, right? Thank goodness. And they were like, oh, right, other stuff can happen besides just like closing a street and putting more restaurant seating. So the grants that went to arts organizations were really for more, and the majority of the Take It Outside grants that they announced last week were really focused on stuff, on like getting space heaters, building an outdoor performance venue out from scratch, that sort of thing, and less of like a project grant. They're more capital expenditures. But if I were a group of artists trying to figure out something like that, I would take a look at all of the organizations that just got, the arts organizations and the non-arts organizations that just got Take It Outside grants, and say, hey, you got this state money, will you program, like, now you have this stuff, will you program this? Like, can we work together to, you have this stage, you have these heaters, let's do a reading there, is what that's what I would do. So it's more like looking at and coming after for that kind of thing. But if you're, you know, and I will also say one thing that I'm like super intrigued by but don't know that much about, and they did not get a Take It Outside grant in the last round, I don't know that they applied for one, is AS220 just made a little like parking, they're calling it a parklet that can be programmed. Yeah, it's the size of one parking space. It's right in front of their Empire Street building, but you know, like, cool, right? I'm interested to see what that is, and like if that can be a model for other smaller arts organizations to do programming, like small programming. Yes, exactly.
The other thing that is possible, I don't know if you know, What's Your Flower Farm in Olneyville?
Mm-hmm.
Are open to working with arts I'm on the board there. So
yeah.
Are open to working with arts organizations to hold events on their property. There's private parking. You can be outside, it's wheelchair accessible, and there's porta potty.
Yeah. And I will also say about the Flower Farm in general is they've been like aggressively arts friendly since the very beginning. And I've been like super into watching, like, you know, they've hired artists to do, like, they hired a photographer that I really like, Jose Ramirez, to do a like iPhone photography class. Right? Like, what a cool thing for a flower farm to do is like teach a bunch of people to take good pictures on their phones at a like, anyway. But yes, there's a bunch of smaller arts organizations that are making their spaces accessible and like trying to figure out how to support smaller stuff. I know, like, oh my gosh, what is the museum in Bristol? And the name is just escaping me right now. But they've been doing some stuff. not helpful at all. But yeah, there's a lot of outdoor non-arts nonprofits, museum spaces that have been holding like smaller, socially distanced, either ticketed or free arts events, which is cool. Okay, artist parks and planning grants. So we don't have those in Rhode Island. I think that probably some of our other state and city grants could be used for things like that, like our project grants for individuals is frequently used for programming in parks by individual artists. Unfortunately, all of that grant making's on hold because we have no money. But particularly the City of Providence Arts, Culture, and Tourism does a lot of public art programming, both performance and like physical pieces. And they also do a lot of the permitting, and they're also just great folks to know in general and can be a really good resource about that. Okay. Other programs, national things. Okay, eviction moratorium. There's a slightly dicey eviction moratorium through the end of the year. This is sort of good, but it just pushes the cliff further off, right? Because it's not actually rent relief. It's just that you can't be evicted and there's a bunch of paperwork, and your landlord, this is for renters, your landlord has to be willing to work with the program. And what I've been hearing is that particularly for larger landlords has not been true. So folks have been getting evicted anyway. If you are getting evicted because of COVID related stuff like inability to pay rent, or if your landlord is doing a self-help eviction, so turning off your utilities, changing the locks, just being a jerk, contact Seth Magaziner, the treasurer, state treasurer. He's really active around this to make sure that that's not happening, because that's super illegal. Your landlord should not be evicting you by a self-help eviction. That being said, as soon as the eviction moratorium is over, real bad things are going to happen. You know, I'm not my normal sunny and optimistic self right now. Okay, federal student loans. This is a big one for me because I also went to grad school. So federal student loans, that's student loans that are through the federal government, not private student loans, are currently, your repayment is currently on pause and you're not accruing interest and there's no penalties. For folks like me who are on the public service repayment thing, student loan program, this is extra great because these are counting as payments, and I'm paying $0 and instead putting it in savings in case everything is terrible and I don't have a job. But anyway, you shouldn't have to do anything. If you're not on a repayment plan, on a repayment program like me, where eventually it will hopefully be, words are hard. What's the word I'm looking for? Forgiven after a certain number of years. And you can pay right now. Right now would be a great time to be paying on your student loan because you're not accruing any interest. So you'd really be bringing the principal down. One of the BC things about the student loan repayment, right, is you spend so much money on the interest and so little money on the principal that it just takes forever and you end up paying way more than you originally took out, right? So right now, if you can afford it, be paying on your student loan because it will take a bigger chunk out of it and make the payments lower in the future. Okay, and here we are on PPP and EIDL loans from the SBA. So we already sort of talked about those, but PPP, Payroll Protection Program, that's tapped out, that's ended now. We are still crossing our fingers for a second round of PPP loans because they're very popular along bipartisan lines. So a second round of PPP loans has been in both Republican and Democrat COVID relief plans. If they ever get to an agreement, who knows? But PPP, again, those loans are fully forgivable, and they're essentially to pay people to keep your payroll going. But sole proprietors are eligible, and essentially it would be paying yourself. So it's about income last year. So if that reopens again, we'll be doing more workshops on that. Stay tuned. Okay, small business resources. So here are some places you can go to ask for help about things in addition to me. So SBA Rhode Island, it's a, like everything else in Rhode Island, it's a small local chapter. They're very accessible. I've been getting pretty fast responses from a variety of their staff members. And by pretty fast responses, I mean less than 24 hours, even when like things were crazy with them in April and May when they were trying to figure out PPP. But they're good. SCORE Rhode Island is a small business support group, and they'll do a mentor match with you. So if you need business advice and support about a specific topic, they'll try and match you with a mentor who will give you, again, like free advice on how to do something, whether it's like making a business plan or marketing or whatever. Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts New England. So it's not actually called that yet because that's something we were starting to work on in the fall, and now everything is nutsy. But essentially there's a Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts based at the Arts and Business Council of Boston. They're working, it's sort of like a 5-year plan to expand to be supporting all of the New England states. So they're working with all the state arts councils. So I know their staff personally. They're great. They have expanded their programming and support during COVID for artists and arts nonprofits to talk about things, IP, bankruptcy, other like major issues. They'll give you some free advice and point you in the right direction, right? And this is who I'm working with. This is their VLA staff member, Luke, is who's teaching the IP workshop. So he's great and someone I knew have hung out with in real life at like national conferences and stuff. Center for Women in Enterprise, which is based here. It's not just for women. They'll support any human that's working on small business and entrepreneurship. Of the like small business webinars, workshops, stuff that I've taken since pandemic, and I've been trying to take all of them just to see what they're like so I can, send them along to people. CWEs have been my favorite. And I've also heard there's a number of artists around that have gone through their programs and have really liked them and benefited from them. So they at least speak arts a little bit. Then there's also the Small Business Development Center at URI. Same thing, both CWE and the SBDC are sort of affiliates of the SBA. So they get a lot of their funding from the SBA, and then they do the like heavy lifting of like one-on-one work and actual programming. And then finally, Assets for Artists at Mass MoCA, which is a really wonderful program that's the brainchild of the person who's still running it, Blair Benjamin, who I've known since before I lived in Rhode Island. And they do one-on-one business coaching. They also have, artist residencies. They do a small granting program in partnership with us. And then we do some programming of business specific workshops that we'll hopefully be offering again this year, but pending budget. But Blair is doing some free one-on-one business coaching, or at least pointing in the right direction right now for free for New England artists. Tell him I sent you. He's a wonderful human, and just like, he's who I want to be when I grow up, right? Except I think like I am grown up and we're not that different in age, but he's really good at what he does. So all of those are like not money, but they are help on you getting your business practices in alignment. Okay, how we doing? Okay, the next slide is like so much text, so I'm just gonna talk, but it's there. I'm calling this crystal ball time because this is just all like educated guesses about what's happening on a state and federal level about COVID and economic recovery in general. And I tried to make this a little bit vague because particularly the first piece, everyone's waiting to see if there's going to be another federal COVID relief bill, changes on a daily basis, right? There were some glimmers of hope this past week. Those glimmers of hope have gone away right now. So right now, my educated guess is that there might be another federal COVID relief bill. It will not come until after the election and possibly not until January. And those two statements are true regardless of who wins the presidential election. So I'd like to think there will be some sort of another round of federal COVID relief. I don't know what will be in it. It really depends, because we know now that it will be after the election. I think it really depends on what happens in the Senate and presidential race. But I do expect, regardless of which party is in leadership, that it will include another round of PPP and probably another round of just direct stimulus payments. Everything else, who the heck knows? State budget is coming mid to late November at the earliest. They have said that they're going to wait until after the general election because nobody wants to be campaigning on what the budget that they would have to put out right now would look like. Right now, what we know is that there's a budget shortfall of somewhere between 835 and 900 million at the state level for this year. And that's like, you know, I'm from Arizona, I'm from a much bigger state. So there, that's like whatever, but here that's a very large portion of our state budget. So we are expecting across the board cuts in the budget for all of state government, and potentially preparing for some furloughs. We are not anticipating layoffs. So but like, again, this is all just me making some educated guesses. I really have no idea. So my guess is that 6 months from now, I will still be working, but I probably will only be working 4 days a week, or something like that, which is better than nothing. So we'll see. We have no idea how much funding we're going to get for grants. We'll have some money probably because of the way that the NEA funding works. So National Endowment for the Arts, we get 30% of our budget typically from the NEA. But the way the NEA does it is they're required by statute to re-grant 40% of their budget every year to state arts agencies, right? So a lot of money from the NEA has to flow to state arts agencies. The good news about that is we know that that money is coming because it's not they grant like a year ahead of time. So even if the NEA was eliminated today, we'd get funded this year and next year, right? And the NEA is not going anywhere. They're actually in the current budget and in all of the COVID relief bills in line for a budget increase, which is great. The arts actually, NEA and RISCA enjoy pretty strong bipartisan support. So neither entity is gonna go away. It's just a matter of like how bad the cuts will be across the board. So anyway, the NEA money comes to us, and then what the NEA requires of states is a dollar for dollar match from the state government. So we will at least have whatever money we get from the NEA and a dollar for dollar match. Otherwise, we don't get the NEA money. So we'll have some budget. We just don't know how much and what it will be like. And again, if there's furloughs, that'll be state government wide. It won't be targeted at RISCA. So Nationally, we're seeing a lot of the granting programs from private foundations, like from the folks who still have money to give, pivoting to artist relief funds and also like organization relief funds. Based on how things are going, particularly in performing arts, I don't expect that to change until the fall. So, and by the fall, I mean next year, when we're looking at seeing arts organizations who are saying, we're gonna, you know, like mostly theater, we're gonna reopen in fall 2021. So my guess is that you'll continue to see a lack of like funds to make art or because you're awesome writers, and more funds available to because you can't pay your rent, right? Which is good in my opinion. Again, the real money is in those small business relief programs. Those have so much more funding and support than anything in the artist relief world ever will. So please, please, please take advantage of those. Those are also likely to be more, like not only have more money, but be longer lasting. It is my opinion that it's going to get worse economically before it gets better. We just saw huge layoffs at a bunch of airlines. Disney just laid off like 30,000 people. We haven't seen major state and local government cuts yet, but we're pretty sure that's coming. In City of Providence, a lot of the city staff is on partial furlough or through the work share program. So like arts, culture, and tourism, they're all working either 3 or 4 days a week, but that's not just them, that's all of city government. So there's gonna be future waves of layoffs and new people unemployed. Good things that have come out of this, there are some. Firstly, artists and the arts sector have enjoyed like brand new, really great advocacy for the sector as a whole, not just around economic impact, but also about like what everybody is doing in their day-to-day lives as they deal with lockdown, as they deal with quarantine, as they deal with whatever is arts, right? They're binging TV shows, they're listening to podcasts, they're listening to music, they're, you know, you know, figuring out how to take watercolor classes. You know, the arts have never been more visibly important to the fabric of everyday life and to our economy. And also folks and organizations are binding together to advocate as a group, both nationally and regionally, in a way that has not been seen before. Like we see things like the National Independent Venue Association, which was already in the works. They were like talking about starting something like that before pandemic hit. Now they have thousands of members, and all Congress people and senators know who they are because they've like turned out so many letters about the Save Our Stages Act, right? So like some really amazing things are happening as far as advocacy around arts funding and support for the arts. There's also an increased understanding, though we are still fighting this battle and will be forever. And I just keep hitting new roadblocks where I'm like, what do you mean you think the arts sector in Rhode Island is just Trinity Rep? Can we take a step back and talk about that for a minute? But a really deep increased understanding of the arts sector is not just things like Trinity Rep and Waterfire and the Philharmonic, but also a zillion small businesses, a lot of really small nonprofits as really being impactful in the current conversations about race and racial equity that we're having. Like arts organizations and artists have been really at the forefront of pushing that. So, you know, that's a good thing that we'll have, both of those will have really long-term impacts, really positive long-term impacts on the arts ecosystem as a whole and on all of humans. You know, like I really believe that all humans would be better if they were actively participating in the arts in some way. So I think that's good. The other good news that we're seeing that is really nice and helps me feel better about the world in general is that both at the federal and the state level, and I will say this, the state level in Rhode Island, arts programming and the arts like things like RISCA and the NEA are not being specifically targeted for cuts or elimination. This is something that we have seen at both the federal and the state level in past recessions and depressions, and just in general when people get mad about stuff. And we're not seeing any of that in Rhode Island or at a federal level. There have been no calls to say, like, hey, in this economic crunch, let's eliminate the NEA, or hey, in this economic crunch, let's eliminate RISCA, or even cut funding just to those spaces. It's all just like, it sucks for us because it sucks for everybody. We're just seeing across the board cuts. So that's great. I mean, it's terrible, but it's really good that we're very clearly the arts are not being targeted for elimination or cuts in any way from a governmental funding perspective. Okay, that's all my slides.
Thank you. Molly, we would be clapping, except that we're all muted.
So I'm stopping the share so you see me now. Sage, there's some cool stuff happening out of NEFA along racial equity, and then there's also some specific stuff around racial equity coming out of like the Arts Administrators of Color Network and that sort of stuff. That's both relief funds specifically for BIPOC artists and arts administrators, but also for doing work around racial equity. I can, if you send me an email, I will send you some links. Okay, other questions? What else do you all want to know?
And you should feel free to unmute and ask or use the chat.
And NEFA is New England Foundation for the Arts. So the way sort of governmental arts funding works is we have the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a federal government agency. Then we have all of these regional, every region has one, ours is NEFA, a regional foundation, which is a nonprofit that sort of helps guide all of the states. So New England Foundation for the Arts is ours. Then there's state arts agencies, and then a lot of cities have city arts agencies, depending on the size of our cities. I think there's only 2 in Rhode Island, but there's some other more informal ones. But East Providence has an arts council, and then City of Providence. How y'all feeling? Was I too gloom and doom? Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, everybody.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
This is probably going to be a little bit, I guess you can say, maybe amateur, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, as someone who's considering, trying to get more into freelancing and becoming a working writer. You had mentioned something interesting at the beginning of this, where you said you have to know what you're doing before you take action. So I'd assume that it's best to have creative work ready and then dive into the resources, or do you think knowing ahead of time or being familiar with everything would be helpful? I guess a little bit of what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that there's no right way to do it other than just doing it, and that it's going to be different for everybody. What I really think is like you don't need to know specifics, but you need to know what you want, what you want your life to be like, what you're working towards, what your definition of success is. And your definition of success is going to be different than every other person's. So thinking about that and then building the business practices to support that, right? Because the business practices of your art making should support you in your art making, not the other way around, right? Like the making the money, the doing the grant writing, the doing the budgeting, the doing the taxes, the doing the marketing, that should be in support of the art making and the life you want, rather than the art making being in support of the marketing. So you have to figure out what kind of life, what your goals are. before you can figure out what your business practices are going to be. And I'm never going to give you art genre specific advice unless it's like in theater, which is my background is in the performing arts. And that I can do because I was worked in the performing arts for 15 years before making this transition. But I will always talk to you and give you support about your business practices. So I'm really focused on the business practices following the personal goals rather than the art making. You should just always just be making art. But you can focus it in once you have those goals and identity. But I would say if you're just starting out and figuring it out, take in all of the classes and workshops and whatever is available to you. There's no right way. There's no exactly correct order of when to do what.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And I would add to that searching for emerging writer or artist grants is a good way to get into looking for funding. And you can, you have to prepare some materials, so you have to have something ready, but they're usually a little bit gentler in the application. And once you start getting grants, that picks up the momentum for your practice too.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you.
I have a quick question. I just moved back to Rhode Island, literally 2 days ago.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Well, I've been in the area for a minute, but new to the area. How long will I need my residency here, or to file my business through Rhode Island before I can get any help or applied for things? Is it, I know that it's 2 years for some of the student loans for RIC and CCRI and all of that stuff, but is that kind of across the board in that sense too?
I don't know about the business stuff. I don't know how long you need to have had a residency in Rhode Island to get the business grants. One thing about the business grants is they're almost all only for businesses that were in business last calendar year, so in 2019. I don't know how that works if you're a business like a writer that has just was in existence last year, but was in existence last year in a different state. I don't know that. So email me and remind me of this question and I'll find out. For RISCA, you have to have for our grants that aren't happening this year, you have to have lived in Rhode Island for 12 months.
Cool, thank you. Appreciate that.
But I think you can file for your business, register with the Secretary of State and stuff immediately.
Yeah, that's definitely on my to-go too. Thank you, I appreciate that.
So I have an additional question to that same question, in that if I've been a self-employed sole proprietor for 15 years and I moved here 3 years ago, but I didn't register with the state, are any of these programs possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but let's also get you registered with the state and stuff, but you're definitely eligible.
I've got another one.
Yeah, I love the questions.
I got another one. I have been employed as a certified ROLFer, which is healthcare holism. So my question would also be, if that is what I've been putting officially on my taxes as being, and I'm a writer as well, but I'm not really making money as a writer, then is it relevant? I mean, I see a ton of information that will be relevant to me anyway, but as far as being an artist, is that considered even close?
So a lot of these small business grants, you have to have been making money in the past on it. So I would say you should be applying for the small business grants for your Rolfing business for sure, which also all y'all, if you have any back issues, particularly around the mechanics of your posture, yes. As a person who has a growth defect in my spine, I've yes, anyway, let me recommend that. Let me take a little detour to say yes to Rolfing. So you'd apply as Rolfing, but what I would recommend is figuring out a way to differentiate the two businesses, like in some way, paper trail wise, because some folks have been able to apply for like multiple PPP loans, one for their like massage therapy business and one for their art business, right? Because you have two small businesses. So I would be operating, if I was you, I would work on operating as if you were running two small businesses.
Right, which I have technically in my accounting and everything else are all different, but yeah, that except for my website, which I'm now actually combining because I write about Rolfing and I write Rolf about writing, you know. Thank you. I'll do the boot camp. You would recommend that, right?
Yes. Yeah, and it's just me, so
And I
it'll
can help
be
those questions.
like this.
Awesome.
This will be the style of the boot camp.
Cool. That'll do it. Thank you.
My very formal, at a distance teaching style. Anne.
Yay. Thinking of writers as technicians as opposed to artists for just a minute.
My partner is a technical writer, so I'm there.
Okay, yeah. But including anything like SEO writing, blog writing, social media writing, grant writing, website writing, brochure writing, all the different writing things that go along with that. Often I know a lot of small business owners and they're not writers because it's a skill. And so when they go to a class or they talk to an advisor and the advisor says, well, you need to write this to get new customers or whatever, they go, and then they go running away and they don't do it. Given that you're talking to all the different people who are running the small business courses, and I'm sure there's more, there's probably the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses, which I know have changed their program now, so even smaller businesses can join, et cetera, the various accelerators, et cetera. Would it make sense to ever create a board or a list or something of qualified Writers Club members who are available with different writing skill sets for the small businesses going through these courses?
If y'all make that list, I will send it to everybody I can.
Would that be something, is it just like, oh, cute idea, or would that actually be something useful? And how would we help people set their rates? Or we don't help people set their rates because that's not cool.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I do know that that's a skill folks are looking for, particularly right now as everybody's moving so heavily to websites. And I think being able to give folks like CWE and the Small Business Development Center at URI lists of like local folks who know how to do this, who would be, you know, reasonable rates, and it's small businesses supporting small businesses, right? And I think even like, as we're all pivoting to figure out how to make livings, like if you're really good at that stuff, I would recommend putting together a 2-hour 101 level webinar and pitching it, because folks pay for those things, right? Like there's a lot of artists are making a secondary income stream in like learning how to do one artist specific business practice really well, and then giving workshops and webinars and lectures, and like we'll pay, you know, like RISCA pays when we have somebody come in to do that, we pay them, right? Like I don't get paid extra to do it because it's my job, but if I do it for somebody else outside of the state of Rhode Island, I get paid. So I would say like there's two income streams there. It's teaching people how to do it at a 101 level, which also generates people hiring you to do it, right? Like people will come to your workshop, be like, oh crap, that's way harder than I thought it was. It's a whole different skill set. I'll hire this person because I already know them. So it's double income. Anyway, yes, if y'all make a list, I will help get it to people that might hire technical writers, particularly around web writing right now. That's a great idea. I'm deeply invested in artists getting additional income streams, particularly from something that's directly related to their art making.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anyone has any.
Can I just ask just a quick yes or no question? I think it sounded like earlier you were saying that even if we are sole proprietors or freelancers, that we should register with the state as a small business. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, take my business boot camps class. It varies. It's not a yes or no question. A lot of it is about the name of your business. A lot of it is just like making sure that name is protected. So if you don't have a business that has a name other than just your name, you might not need to. And it depends on what services you're providing. If you're just writing and like selling books, probably not.
Okay, I will definitely sign up for the boot camp.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just a quick note to our members, you are able to use the club's address as your business address if you are registering as like an LLC or sole proprietor and need to be in the city of Providence for whatever reason, or if that's helpful to you, keep that in mind.
That's a great member benefit. I didn't know you had that. That's like,
Yeah,
that's really smart.
Yeah. All right, do we have one more question before we head out here to the beautiful Saturday afternoon?
I'm gonna go apple picking this afternoon, y'all. I'm really excited.
Just rub it in. Note in the chat that Susanna has posted, I hope that's okay, Molly, your slides ready to go? Yes. And the handout should be there as well. We'll post these things in the Slack, the club Slack, but you can also reach out over email if there's something you're missing, or directly to Molly. Thank you. Any last questions or comments? Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to Molly so much for this wonderful information. This is a difficult time for everyone, and it's wonderful to have your candid candor at this time, but also just to get some facts and help. And we really appreciate your work at RISCA. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all for hosting me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I wish everyone a really good and safe weekend. Next Friday is the next club cocktail chat at 5 p.m. We have author Carrie Arsenault, author of Milltown and Environmental History on. So join us for that. And be sure to sign up for the What Fear Virtual Masquerade party on October 30th. We hope to see everyone there.
Woohoo!
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you. Thanks, Molly.
Bye.
Thank you.